The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Well, hello. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And it is E-1. Election Day -1. Tomorrow is the big day today, and I can't wait for Wednesday's show because we're going to find if the invading hordes of change are victorious over the entrenched hordes of political patronage, and we're going to see if people do go to the polls as we've encouraged, and hopefully we'll have a very good turnout, and hopefully we're going to have people who pay attention to the candidates and stuff. But before, we have someone that we're going to bring on shortly, but I just got to say about tomorrow. Tomorrow is coming very quickly, and we've talked a lot about the politics of Fall River, and I just want to remind everybody before they go to vote to look at the facts. Don't listen to the hyperbole. And the fact is that what disturbs me about a lot of these, especially these incumbents, is they don't speak the truth. They manipulate the truth. You know, as when the mayor said that 19 out of 20 people said they wanted the fee increase, the trash fee, when he framed the question like, do you want to pay $5, $10, or do you want to burn to death and have roving hordes of bandits kill you on the street because we're going to lay police and fire off? So, you know, those kind of things are manipulations. When they begin to use statistics like the schools are really improving, yet when I have the Massachusetts schools and district profiles, the accountability data, I find that every category, all students, high needs, low income, Asians, African Americans, Hispanics, Latinos, multi-race, white, all of them have one thing in common. The comment is they do not meet the target. But they tell you everything is always rosy. They paint a rosy picture. Now, they talk about we have a city that the average income is the second lowest in the state for any city of our size. They're overburdened with taxes and underserviced. And when you go to the polls tomorrow, remember, you know, don't read the campaign slogans. Look around you and see if it's a better Fall River. And before I turn it over to CJ for his little hello before I bring this guest on, I will say that, you know, for those who say that, you know, we don't do any good here, we're always negative and stuff, I went by the corner of South Main and Rodman yesterday, and it's cleaned up. So I guess the fact that I said there were 11,000 cigarette butts and trash all over the place, they must have sent somebody down there. So somebody was listening. So it was nice to see it actually is cleaned up a little. It's still not great, but at least it doesn't look like a third world country. So with that, I'm done with my opening for today. So
You won't have to wash your sneakers next time you're down there?
no, I won't.
Well, you know, it's interesting because, again, you know, the eve of any election always gets to be very interesting. This weekend, I wrote 3 articles, which my brain is taxed now. You know, I can barely write one sometimes. But, you know, we have to address, as you said, what these people are actually stand for, what they've actually done when you're dealing with the incumbents. And then you can only go by what the candidates say that are seeking in office. You know, the reality of the matter is Fall River needs change. It needs a huge change. And a certain group on Facebook has exceeded the 10,000 mark. So of course, I had to make a comment about that and say, if 60% of your people came out and voted for your particular candidates, you'd stop the election. Because you'd make a change. That would be 6,000 people. And you would make a significant change in government. You would show that you're a force to be reckoned with. And of course, as you know, the Facebook warriors come out and say, oh, well, my opinions count when I get into a public debate here. Well, that's a wonderful thing, and that does share some information, but guess what? I go out to the city council meetings. I know you go out to the city council meetings. I know Jordan goes out to the city council meetings. I know that Michelle goes out to the city council meetings. Carlos goes out to the city council meetings. And we all say what we need to say. But we do that publicly so that everybody can hear it, not a select few. And I think that's one of the things that's most important for us to happen, is that we need to voice what we feel we need, and then we need to get behind it and back it up and vote for what we desire. And we are the cause of our problem. Decades of chow mein sandwiches, and this year, Coney Island hot dogs.
Well, you're right. You're right, CJ. Well, the fact is that, you're right. Somebody that wants to look at a social media source like Facebook and say that the debate is good, he's passing on knowledge. And I will have to give you a little bit of the Tao Te Ching, a little Lao Tzu. Knowledge is merely the gateway to the house of wisdom. Because you know about something doesn't have any effect on that unless you do something about it. You can know you're an alcoholic, and if you don't stop drinking, you remain an alcoholic. The fact is that all the debate on Facebook doesn't do any good if you're still on Facebook the day after the election and you didn't vote and you're complaining again. The reality is there's only one way to affect change, and that is to put your money where your mouth is and get up tomorrow and vote. And I hope we have 10,000 people although I think a lot of them don't even live in the community. But the fact is, I hope every single person who comments on Facebook and lives in this city goes and votes. As I said, I have always, been a proponent of, I would like to see a 100% turnout, and whether my people win or not, the people that I feel are the best people, I will then have to live with what this, then it'll be a true government. The people have spoken, and I have to live with the government, but at least in reality, if we have a very high turnout, the people have truly spoken, not 12 or 14 or 15% of the population is going to give us is going to dictate what kind of government we have, and that's wrong. And with that, I will now segue in. We have a guest here today, and he was an employee here, so we couldn't really have him on before. And he wanted to say a few words, and he's an old friend, and I've known him for many, many years, as has CJ. So with that, I'd like to ask Steven Camara, no relation, by the way, up. Hi, Steve.
How are you, Mr. Camara?
Very good, Mr. Camara.
The Mutual Admiration Society.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Mic up. We know we don't have to show him how to mic up.
Couldn't get enough of the place, huh, Steve?
Well, this is
happy retirement, by the way.
Thank you. This is week one. I was working until last Monday. Last Monday was officially my last day working at the college, and I know that I need to stay focused and busy and active, and the best way, by the way, which is my camera, this one or this one? I always get confused. But I know...
They'll find you.
I like to look into the eye of the camera. So, I think that it was important for us to stay busy, and I thought, why not get back into this race like you? I've been to a few council meetings. I was particularly, I'll tell you the meeting where I began to say, if these voices don't change, I'm going to have to come and be a part of the debate, was the shifting of the tax burden to the property taxpayers and the rent payers away from business. Now, I grew up in a small business, and I know that we're all promoters of small business, and we recognize that business is really the foundation of our jobs opportunity. But the other thing that's so important is the people's ability to pay. Property taxpayers are struggling. I don't have to tell the voters that. They know it. Rent payers are struggling because when property taxpayers are receiving increases, rent payers share in that increase. And you can't keep shifting away from the business community to the residential community and not expect more bankruptcies, more foreclosures, more homelessness. So I want to be supportive of small business and providing them what they need. Clean streets are so important. An attractive city is so important. I've often said that, we talk about hospitality as an example. Well, sure, hospitality is important, but you need to clean up the city first. You need to, it's sort of like a house when you're having company. You need to make sure the dishes are done, the beds are made, the dusting is done to the best of your ability, and then you can invite the public or your friends or neighbors or family to come in. Same with our city. We need to clean it up. I remember on the 25th anniversary of Earth Day, which was some 16 years ago, I co-chaired through the YMCA. I was working at the Y at the time with, I think it was Mr. Balboni from then BFI, and we co-chaired and had over 500 people. It was really the first time there was a mass cleanup of Fall River. It was when Kathy Viveris was running against Ed Lambert. Ed Lambert had his trucks out on Martine Street. Kathy Viveris was knee-deep in mud and shopping carts on Amity Street. And yet we did a whole citywide cleanup. It'd be great if every candidate that's running right now would get out and do a citywide cleanup, as we did back then some 16 or so years ago. But those are the kinds of things that are important to me. It's a recognition that property tax payers and rent payers have had enough. We need to wipe out this $10 per unit fee. That is absurd. When that was instituted, I said, what could be worse than providing that, I can say now, retiree on fixed income? I'm thinking of more of the elder. I mean, my Aunt Evelyn always used to say, how can I do it? How can I pay for food and medicine? And she would be outraged today if she had to pay for a unit fee. Puts out a little bag of trash paying $10. And a family with 5 kids, 3 dogs, 2 cats, they're putting out 6 bags of trash paying the same amount, each paying $10. Is that fair? By any standard, it's not fair. So that to me is the first thing that we need to do, is wipe out unfair, absolutely regressive taxation and fees. And by the way, another thing that really disturbed me about this council was back in 2008 when I was last on the council, Ray Haig and I, in fact, argued, why would the city council want to transfer its authority to boards and commissions to set fees? And yet they did it. And many of them are still sitting there today. And it seems to me absurd for them to say today that they're the champion of the renters and the payers and the voters of Fall River, when they shifted their responsibility to commissions and boards to set the fees, many of which we're now absorbing and we're eating, if you will, the dumpster fee, the fee attached to the disposal of trash that they're still struggling with in the ordinance committee. But yet it was a shift that the council voted for back in 2008. And again, Ray Haig and I argued, City Council, this is your authority. We need to take tough votes sometimes. We need to either vote yes to increase or no not to increase. But that's something that should remain with the council. This council shirked that responsibility. So I'm all about change. I've always been about change. I know that it's kind of tough after you've served on the school committee and served in the city council to say you're the agent of change. But just think, if my positions had prevailed, some of which I'll just mention, we would have an airport today. We never would have spent money on the LNG fight because we would have had an airport. The last vote, a 5-4 vote of the council that I served as president as, was to keep an airport open. Let that be a method of transportation for those who are working in the economic development field, because there were planes flying in and out of Fall River, and they were using the industrial park. Would we cut off our roads or our rail or our rivers to transportation? No, but we cut off air transportation. That was a position that I had taken. Another position that I had a majority vote on for a short time was keeping the police station downtown, investing in our downtown and keeping the courthouse on Rock Street. Again, cost effective. If you have a prisoner that spent the weekend in the jail, how nice to bring him through an underground corridor into the courthouse, not paying for people to transport him from Pleasant Street to South Main Street. It all made sense, but yet we have not that.
Steve,
So
when does things that make sense ever make sense for government?
It's tough. It's tough.
And you know, I find it interesting that you brought up the fact that the city council abrogated their responsibility by passing, and well, actually accepting a mass general law, which turned all their right to set fees over to the boards and commissions. And they play ignorant to it now. People who are on the council now, that were on the council then, and you know who they are, play, oh no, we never did that. We didn't do that. Yes, you did. And they had to be reminded of that vote.
It was a 6-2 vote with one councilor absent.
Yeah. So, you know, it's amazing at how the revisionist history keeps happening. And you know, Chip talks a lot about revisionist history. And we have a lot of it here at Fall River. And we can no longer tolerate that. And you and I both know, Steve, Chip and I both know, the three of us have had contentious debates. We've never, ever made this personal. Never. Okay? And that's the thing. That's why in the city council right now, there aren't debates anymore. It's my way or the highway, and everything becomes a personal attack. That's not what we need.
You're right, and I've got to interject here. As you said, we have been on opposing sides many times, and we have been on the same side many times. I will remind you, there was another vote that is near and dear to my heart. You're one of the people who supported maintaining a civil service fire chief, and all the dire predictions we made came true, and we had to go back to that.
Absolutely.
So you were right. But the thing about it is, I will say that while you were a member of the council in past, in the past, you always took a position, as we always encourage on this show. You take your position. If you feel you're right, you fight for that position. And whether I agree or disagree, I respected that. And I can say, as you were a councilor for a while, and we can say that there was a lot of debate, sometimes contentious.
Absolutely.
But that's what makes good government. This is what disturbs me about what we see today. They think everybody is supposed to be a bobblehead and nod their head, and their job is to agree with the mayor. And if you don't agree with the mayor, you're some type of obstructionist.
A phrase I've used, I think, in every election I've ever run is democracy demands participation. The council members need to remember they're civil servants. When the public comes to speak their mind, they need to be treated with respect. I haven't seen a lot of that in the council chamber. And then when the councilors are not treated with respect by the audience, then they say, what? You're not treating us with respect. Well, it's a two-way street. We're public servants. When we get elected, we are the public servants. I want to encourage participation at the council meetings. This 3-minute rule was only meant to be for citizen input time before a regular council meeting. When something goes before a subcommittee, that's where you go for full discussion. And yet to see a 3-minute rule established for subcommittees, not the way it was supposed to be. When the airport issue is an example, very contentious at the time, I made sure I set up 2 tables. In fact, custodial staff, I used to put them through a lot, because I'd say I want to have 2 tables on either side of the finance committee table so that an equal number of people can argue each side of the position. And I kept time to make sure that if 5 minutes were given to one side, 5 minutes was given to the other side. I like raucous debate. That's what democracy, and I've heard you say this as well, democracy is about serious debate. It's about confrontation. One needs only, as you've mentioned also, watch the House of Commons in England, for government from which we've come. And in a sense, we are from English heritage in some ways, at least the political system to some extent. And certainly we should have that kind of vigorous debate on the critical issues that face us, because it's only through vigorous debate. You know, you've mentioned someone. I have a little quote that I received from Chief Justice Earl Warren. And Chief Justice Earl Warren said, anything I've ever done in my life that's been worthwhile, I caught hell for. That's where I want to be. I want to catch a little hell from people here and there saying, you know, why are you taking this position, or why are you taking that position? Because you know you're doing something right if you've gathered up some steam. And I'm going to mention one other thing. I served with John Medeiros for many years, and many would say to me at election time, you know, I'm voting for you and John Medeiros. And I would often say, And John became my really closest friend. I think probably of all the councilors I ever served with, I honor him the most. Because he knew where he stood, and he argued his position, and I often disagreed with his position, but at the end of the day, I loved him and his family, and it hurts me even to think that he's passed, because he was an honest man that gave his position, and people would say, I'm voting for the two of you because you're both honest people that give your position and you stand by it. So I want that vote. I want the vote, if you want honesty and we want an advocate for the people's interest, and you want to make sure that the doors are open for the public to come in and argue their perspective and be appreciated and respected. And if you want an advocate for the taxpayer and the rent payer, because we've had enough shift onto the property taxpayer, we're struggling, and I'm one of those people struggling to make sure bills are paid every month, fearful of bankruptcy if I don't get those bills paid. So we need to have an advocate for controlling spending, because it is a spending problem, and it's also a problem of not recognizing where resources in the future need to come from. Because we can't go to constant property tax to make things move. The state and federal governments need to be an ally to America as they're allies all around the world, sending our money all around the world. There needs to be an urban policy. People used to be critical of my going to the Massachusetts Municipal Association or to the National League of Cities to try to get advocacy for those tax dollars, income tax, which is a progressive tax, that more of that kind of money comes to us. We will never be able to compete with the Newtons and the Wellesleys until there's a shared responsibility by the Commonwealth and by the federal government that Fall River is as important as are those wealthy communities that surround Boston.
You're right. See, and I have to say that we did have an ulterior motive, not only because you couldn't be on before, but also because it's not only this is campaign. You were you served at a time that when CJ and I talk a lot, people they look at us like we're not telling the truth, that this never happened. We never had a council that actually had very vigorous debate and the city moved forward. And it's nice to have you here because you're actually one of those people who sat in a city council where we had some very, very contentious debate, yet at that time we had 300 firefighters that were paid for by the city. We weren't dependent. We weren't begging the feds and begging the state.
We have things like revenue sharing.
Yeah, we paid our essential. We had priorities in our spending, and it's nice to have. Contrary to what you try to think, some of our detractors, that we make things up, we don't. This man sat in the council, was the president of the city council, and at a time where there were more than one, as he said, Jack Medeiros is a good friend, and he was a good friend of mine. And we would philosophically, politically, diametrically opposed on most issues. But the fact is, he was an honest man who took a position and fought for it tooth and nail. And as did Steve. And Steve was most of the time disagreeing because, John was a very conservative Republican kind of guy, and you're a very liberal Democrat kind of guy. And, never the twain shall meet.
Who knows how to watch his money?
Who knows? Yeah. We're not saying you're not a fiscal conservative, but the fact is that, this just goes to show that, debate isn't bad, as you said. This is government. This is the propaganda that the current politicians have fed the people of Fall River. And a lot of the younger voters don't remember a time, especially the 19, 20-year-old, 21-year-old voters, do not remember a time, and they've been conditioned to say, oh, if somebody disagrees with the mayor, they're against the city, and they should be, you should be thrown out, leave the city, love it or leave it. The old love it or leave it has come back, and this is one of the reasons that it's really good to have you here, because not only from the political standpoint, but from the historical standpoint of where our city was at one time, when our city was a lot better off.
Let me tell you one other number I want you to remember. The number 75. Because that was the first time I ran for public office, was in 1975. I was only 10 years old.
Okay.
But let me tell you that.
He's a politician. He can lie very well.
Let me tell you, back in 1975, 75% of the registered voters came out to vote.
Yes.
75%. And when I hear now 30% come out and they say, oh, it's a wonderful turnout, you know, I'd be happy with a 30% turnout. I'm not really going to be happy because I want to see a 75% turnout. But that's what you, the voters, need to do. Why? That wasn't so long ago. What, 40 years ago?
40 years
in
ago.
1975, 75% of the registered voters came out to vote, and now we can't get 30%?
And we wonder
without
why the
celebrating
government
it?
has gotten worse. And
That's
there
right.
you go. And the other fact is that in 1975, I can guarantee you, I'll have to go back and look at the stat because I won't give a stat off the top of my head, but I know that right now only 37% of the people in the city of Fall River own property. We have driven many of those voters and taxpayers out of the city because of the transition to a government of a bunch of bobbleheads. And this is the problem. And it's good that we have someone here who was actually part of a government and can say, the first time I ran for office, can you imagine 75? The mainstream media will have a stroke if 75% of the people
Even
come
the
out
way
to
we
vote.
campaigned, if you think about going to an event or going to a church feast or something, and know that presumably 3 of every 4 people in that space were voters.
That's right.
Now you go to an event and you got to think 1 out of 3 maybe 1 out of 4. It's a whole different world for governing, and it's not a good one. I believe, I've always said also, that you get the government that you deserve.
That's right, you do.
And if 30% come out, you're going to get 30% of good government.
And you know, the thing is, and Chip, you have to give Steve credit on that quote because we get a lot of hell for what we do. So we've got to be doing something right for sure. But the one thing I can remember, and I mean, in '75 when you first ran, I believe that was for school committee.
School committee, a volunteer position, by the way.
Back then it was a volunteer position.
That's right.
And you had preliminary elections because somebody wanted to run for it.
Exactly. I was in elementary school. I was in an elementary school system that worked. And somehow or another, over the years, that school system, as Chip said at the beginning of the show, no longer meets targets. So what were we doing right then that we're not doing right now? I'll tell you what it is. We went out and we voted. We voted and we got the government we demanded, the government we deserved, and we got the representation that was necessary to affect change and to make sure that the people of Fall River were successful in every endeavor. And for that, Steve, I've got to give you, a couple of thumbs up because you were part of that process. Not that we're endorsing anybody, but we do have to recognize your accomplishments. And I remember some of the debates in the city council when you were city council president. They were civil. They were heated. They were long-standing, but they were civil.
Thanks.
And I got to say one thing, since you guys, your memories are beginning to fail. You were 11 in '75 when you ran. CJ was in grammar school. I was in pre-primary.
Yeah.
So, okay, I might as well.
There we go.
I might as well stretch the truth. So, but I mean, absent that, no, really, it was great to have you.
Thank you.
Because you brought a perspective I think that really needed, and I think it's great timing. The day before the election, it's nice for people, who are going to watch this show to say, hey, you know something? It gives them more food for thought.
And I'm doing it without yard signs. I'm not adding to the waste stream and the litter in our city. But when you do it that way, you need to ask people to pass it on. Tell your friends and family, get out and vote. And if one of those votes can come to a guy named Camara, there were 2 Camaras on the ballot. And there were 2 Steves on the ballot. But somewhere the 2 names Steve Camara come together.
Well, we always close the show. I tell them to stay angry because anger means passion and you might get them to the polls. But also stay informed. And you helped pass a lot of information today, Steve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. It's a pleasure.
And remember, people, tomorrow is our primary day. Please be sure that you get out and vote. If you don't go out and vote, you get the government you deserve. Stay angry, look at the candidates, and vote tomorrow. We'll see you on Wednesday with a heated show, and we're going to talk about those results.
Vote early and vote often.
Can't do that.